You could be hit with a $60,000 fine just for moving a Meyer lemon across a Texas county line. We're revealing 20 forbidden fruits that pit your dream of homegrown produce against strict federal laws that could force the destruction of your favorite tree. The forbidden backyard citrus. We're about to show you 20 forbidden fruits that pit backyard ambition against the powerful forces of agricultural law. For decades, the citrus groves of the Rio Grande Valley have been an agricultural powerhouse. Yet this sweet success has invited invisible enemies that turn a simple backyard tree into contraband. The biggest threat is citrus greening, or Huanglongbing, a devastating bacterial disease spread by a tiny insect known as the Asian Citrus Psyllid. When the psyllid feeds on an infected tree, it becomes a flying needle, injecting the bacteria into every tree it visits, causing the fruit to remain small, green, and bitter, and eventually causing the plant's demise. The tree's leaves begin to yellow in a bizarre, asymmetrical pattern, signifying the pathogen is slowly turning the plant into a permanent, slow-motion ghost in the garden. To contain this biological invasion, the state created strict quarantine zones. In these areas, transporting any citrus plant material, even a small potted sapling bought at a local hardware store, across county lines is highly illegal, triggering massive fines and tree elimination orders. The aim is not to deprive home gardeners of their fruit, but to protect commercial agriculture from total economic collapse. It is a sacrifice of personal convenience for the sake of the entire industry. This is what agricultural protection looks like. A homeowner weeping as their 20-year-old prize-winning citrus tree is chainsawed to the stump. But the forbidden fruit is never far from mind, and the rules only tighten when you consider one of the most popular backyard citrus trees, a hybrid that might be the most dangerous offender of all. The tiny lemon that brings a $60,000 fine, Meyer lemon. The Meyer lemon is the darling of the home gardener, a perfect hybrid of a lemon and an orange, offering a sweeter, softer fruit than its commercial counterparts. But this backyard star is also a silent carrier, its delicate nature making it an ideal vector for one of the most feared pathogens in the citrus world, citrus canker. A homeowner might buy a potted Meyer lemon at a local nursery, unaware that a single plant carries the risk of a regional disaster. Citrus canker is caused by the bacterium Xanthomonas citri and produces ugly, scab-like lesions on the fruit, leaves, and stems, severely weakening the tree. While it isn't harmful to humans, the disease makes the fruit unusable commercially and causes premature dropping. This is why in Texas, especially within established quarantine areas, possession of infected or even simply uncertified citrus stock is treated as a major offense. Authorities are not just worried about the disease itself, but the movement of the tree. A gardener might transport their beloved Meyer lemon only a few miles across a county line, potentially bypassing a regulatory checkpoint and introducing the bacteria into a clean zone. If caught, the resulting penalty for violating these strict agricultural mandates can climb as high as $60,000, transforming a simple act of backyard gardening into an industrial security breach. It's an astronomical price to pay for what seems like a harmless hobby, but the government's focus is on stopping a plague. To be clear, the potential fine is not for unlawful ending of life or arson. It is for transporting a 5-gallon bucket of dirt and roots across the wrong highway. But the government's fight against citrus disaster must go deeper than fruit. The next plan on our list proves that sometimes the threat doesn't even have to bear fruit to be considered illegal, because it is a perfect mole engineered by nature itself to hide the disease. The Trojan horse of the garden, Orange Jasmine. Walk into any Texas nursery and you'll see the orange jasmine, a beautiful ornamental shrub with glossy green leaves and a powerful sweet fragrance that rivals any citrus blossom. It is sold by the thousands to homeowners looking for an attractive hedge. But the authorities see not a plant, but a Trojan horse, a silent accomplice in the destruction of entire orchards. The orange jasmine, scientifically known as Murraya paniculata, is a close biological cousin to the orange and lemon, making it a perfect year-round habitat for the dreaded Asian Citrus Psyllid. This tiny insect, already responsible for spreading citrus greening, uses the orange jasmine as a preferred host, sheltering and reproducing in its dense canopy far better than on commercial citrus trees. The shrubs themselves don't typically bear the illegal fruit that triggers the regulation, but they serve as permanent reservoirs of the insect vector. Gardeners often unwittingly create the ideal conditions for the disease to survive the winter and spread rapidly in the spring simply by planting this attractive, fragrant shrub near susceptible citrus. For this reason, in regulated quarantine zones across Texas, the orange jasmine is essentially a contraband plant, banned from sale, transport, and cultivation. It is a harsh rule that sacrifices beauty for the sake of agricultural survival. It shows how far the state must go to protect its groves, especially when compared to another category of regulation that targets not tiny insects, but the actual fruit itself, transported hundreds of miles across state lines. The avocado with two faces. The ripe avocado is the ultimate prize in a Texas garden, symbolizing fresh, healthy food that commands a premium at the grocery store. Yet, this sought-after fruit carries a quiet risk, particularly when it comes from uncertified sources. The avocado, much like its tropical neighbors, is regulated not because the fruit itself is hazardous, but because of the soil it often travels in and the pests it can host, giving it an official designation as the fruit with two faces. The primary culprit is often the Mexican fruit fly, which readily infests avocados, turning an innocent-looking fruit into a carrier of thousands of eggs. Furthermore, avocado trees sold outside of regulated zones can harbor pathogens like avocado root rot, or carry insects specific to the tree itself, far worse than the fruit flies. To safeguard established commercial growers, the Texas Department of Agriculture maintains strict quarantines that often restrict the movement of non-commercial avocado plants. This means if you buy a potted avocado tree and attempt to transport it out of a quarantined area, especially with soil intact, you are violating agricultural law. The regulation is simple. Commercially grown, clean, packaged fruit is exempt. But that beloved homegrown sapling, or the uninspected box of fruit from a roadside stand, is treated as a potential carrier of disease. The dream of year-round homegrown guacamole comes with a heavy regulatory burden, a burden shared by another citrus relative that is perhaps the most desirable, and thus the most smuggled. The tropical hostage, kaffir lime. Few ingredients carry an aroma as distinct and intoxicating as the leaves of the kaffir lime tree, also known as makrut lime, essential for countless Southeast Asian dishes. Yet, for Texas agricultural inspectors, this specific citrus relative is not a treasured culinary ingredient. It is a tropical hostage, a high-priority target in the state's fight against tree diseases. The reason is simple. Kaffir lime is incredibly susceptible to, and an excellent carrier of, both citrus greening and citrus canker. Because the leaves are prized, not the fruit, gardeners often attempt to purchase and transport small, uncertified trees from areas where the diseases are endemic. This creates a huge smuggling risk. A gardener might rationalize that they aren't growing citrus fruit commercially, but by bringing an infected kaffir lime tree into a clean zone, they are delivering a lethal, incurable pathogen directly to nearby commercial groves. For this reason, the kaffir lime is one of the most strictly regulated citrus-related plants, facing aggressive eradication and quarantine measures whenever it is found in unauthorized locations. The regulatory message is clear. The pursuit of a unique flavor cannot outweigh the risk of agricultural devastation. The exotic promise of one forbidden fruit becomes the potential downfall of thousands of acres of commercial produce. But not all forbidden fruit is regulated due to insect pests. Some are banned for a far more visceral reason: the risk of potential harm. The toxic truth of the Caribbean star, Ackee fruit. Some forbidden fruits carry an air of hazard that has nothing to do with bugs or bacteria. The Ackee fruit, a staple of Jamaican cuisine, is a perfect example, possessing a vibrant red and yellow skin that hides a dark, hazardous secret. Though legally imported and sold in the United States, growing it yourself is strongly discouraged, and importing the unripened fresh fruit is strictly prohibited by the Food and Drug Administration. The hazard lies in the fruit's large black seeds and the fleshy aril surrounding them, which, if eaten unripe, contain high concentrations of a natural toxin called hypoglycin A. Consuming this toxin leads to a severe condition known as Jamaican vomiting sickness, which causes sudden vomiting, dangerously low blood sugar, and can even result in failing to survive if untreated. The body's natural sugar supply is aggressively depleted, leading to an immediate, terrifying biological shutdown. For backyard gardeners in the warmer parts of Texas, growing Ackee is tempting, but the window of safety is incredibly narrow. The aril is only safe to eat when the fruit naturally bursts open, fully ripe. This tight safety margin, combined with the extreme toxicity of the unripe fruit, is why the government maintains a firm grip on its import and sale, ensuring only commercially processed, guaranteed safe fruit enters the food supply. It's a case where the government is protecting citizens not from agricultural ruin, but from their own impatience. But other fruits are forbidden, not because they pose a health risk, but because they pose a different kind of threat. A slow, ecological takeover that can destroy entire forests. The fruit that almost caused widespread damage, black currant. For generations, the black currant was a favorite backyard crop in America. Its tart berries essential for jams, cordials, and pies. But then, a few fungal spores arrived, and this once-loved fruit became the target of one of the longest and most dramatic agricultural bans in United States history. In the early 1900s, foresters realized that the black currant acted as the primary alternate host for white pine blister rust, a devastating fungus that causes 5-needle white pines to perish. The fungus erupts from the bark in oozing yellow-orange blisters, effectively strangling the tree from the inside out and turning entire forests into cemeteries. Since the timber industry relied heavily on these pines, the federal government placed a nationwide ban on growing black currants in 1926, mandating their eradication. While the federal ban was eventually lifted in 1966, the power was transferred to individual states. Texas, which has its own valuable timber resources, still heavily regulates the black currant and its relatives, restricting their sale and cultivation in certain areas to protect susceptible trees. This regulation transformed the humble berry bush from a culinary staple into an ecological criminal, targeted not for its own fruit, but for its dangerous alliance with a specific fungus. It is a cautionary tale of how a simple plant can inadvertently threaten a billion-dollar industry. This fight against nature is often complex, but sometimes the forbidden plant doesn't hide a disease at all. Sometimes it's just a common hedge that is too good at surviving. The spiny orange on the fence line, trifoliate orange. On some old Texas farmsteads, you can still find a tough, rambling hedge armed with large spines that seems to guard forgotten corners of the property. This is the trifoliate orange, or Poncirus trifoliata, and it is a fascinating, yet forbidden, piece of garden history. It earned its keep for decades as a nearly indestructible rootstock for commercial citrus, providing cold hardiness that true citrus trees lack, but its resilience became its undoing. This plant is a nightmare of invasiveness, spreading aggressively via its fallen, bitter fruit and sharp, interlocking branches. It quickly forms an impenetrable thicket, choking out native vegetation and rendering pasture land useless. Worse still, as a close relative of citrus, it acts as a permanent, hardy reservoir for the same devastating diseases that plague commercial orchards. It can harbor the Asian Citrus Psyllid and various canker or blight pathogens without showing severe symptoms itself, constantly threatening to infect nearby groves. For gardeners hoping to grow hardy citrus, this rootstock might seem appealing, but its aggressive nature and role as a disease vector mean that planting the trifoliate orange is now highly discouraged, if not outright forbidden, in many areas. It is the perfect example of a plant that was meant to help citrus survive, only to become a major threat to the entire industry. But invasiveness isn't limited to the citrus family. There is another tropical fruit that is banned simply because it is too eager to take over the land. The unpredictable guava, Cattleya guava. The tropical guava family holds a deep temptation for Texas gardeners, promising sweet, exotic fruit that thrives in the heat. But certain varieties are treated not as delightful delicacies, but as biological threats to the native landscape. Specifically, the Cattleya guava, or Psidium litorale, is viewed with alarm by state agricultural bodies. While not federally banned, it is categorized as a high-risk invasive plant, and its cultivation is strongly discouraged, bordering on illegal in environmentally sensitive areas. In warmer climates globally, this small, resilient tree possesses an almost terrifying ability to escape cultivation and form dense, impenetrable thickets, smothering native plants and completely altering forest floor ecosystems. The main concern in Texas is its aggressive spreading power. Its bright red, acidic fruit is readily consumed by birds and other wildlife, which then disperse its seeds far and wide. Once established, the Cattleya guava is incredibly difficult to eradicate, rapidly colonizing disturbed areas and outcompeting valuable indigenous flora. It serves as a stark warning. The characteristics that make a plant a wonderful, low-maintenance backyard fruit, its hardiness and prolific nature, are the very things that can transform it into an ecological criminal. It's a plant that is simply too efficient at growing. But the greatest invader on our list is one that poses not just a threat to nature, but one that actively replaces entire native ecosystems for its own gain. The invader that bears berries, Chinese tallow. In the Texas fall, there is a tree that turns a stunning kaleidoscope of crimson and gold, a mesmerizing display that makes homeowners rush to plant it for its brilliant shade. This is the Chinese tallow tree, and beneath its beautiful leaves lies a relentless engine of ecological destruction, earning it a spot as one of the state's most wanted invaders. The danger isn't the tree itself, but the massive quantity of waxy white berries, its fruit, that it produces every year. These seeds are a favorite food source for migratory birds, which consume the berries and spread the viable seeds across vast distances, effectively bypassing every fence and property line. Designated officially by the Texas Department of Agriculture as a noxious and invasive weed, the Chinese tallow quickly colonizes wet, disturbed areas, pushing out native plants like oaks and bald cypress, creating dense, single-species forests that destroy biodiversity. Because it grows incredibly fast and tolerates almost any soil condition, it is nearly impossible to eradicate once established. Texas, and the Gulf Coast generally, has spent millions of dollars trying to manage its spread. While you won't get arrested for finding one on your property, selling it, planting it, or moving it is now considered an act of environmental aggression. It's a sobering reminder that sometimes the forbidden fruit isn't regulated for disease or posing a health risk, but simply because it's winning the silent war for the landscape. The beautiful but banned hedge, multiflora rose. Picture a wild, sprawling hedge covered in thousands of small, fragrant white flowers that give way to tiny, brilliant red fruit known as hips. It looks like a romantic natural boundary, but this is the multiflora rose, and it is one of the most destructive and insidious invaders ever introduced to the American landscape. Originally brought over in the 1800s from East Asia, it was widely promoted by the U.S. Soil Conservation Service as a natural, living fence and a beautiful source of wildlife cover. But its hardiness proved to be its downfall. Designated a noxious weed by multiple states, including Texas, the multiflora rose is functionally banned from cultivation because of its incredible aggressive spread. Its fruit, the hips, are devoured by birds, which then distribute the seeds across pastures and woodlands. The plant quickly forms impenetrable thickets, sprawling canes covered in thorns that choke out native grasses and valuable forage. For livestock owners, it's a costly menace, rendering swaths of grazing land useless. For environmentalists, it is an ecological disaster, replacing diverse native habitats with a single, aggressive species. The small, plentiful fruit of the multiflora rose, while not inherently toxic, makes the plant a relentless biological machine, constantly seeking new territory. However, the fight against aggressive plants often turns back to the very pests we tried to avoid, like the flies that terrorize delicate tropical fruit. The forbidden fig of the fly, lychee lychee. The lychee is a globe of sweet, translucent flesh encased in rough, beautiful crimson skin, a coveted tropical fruit that Texans would love to grow in their own yards. But this delicate pleasure is considered a forbidden fig in Texas regulations, its movement strictly monitored due to the threat of a minute winged saboteur, the Mexican fruit fly. This fly is one of the most destructive agricultural pests in the world. It lays its eggs just beneath the skin of ripening lychee, mangoes, and citrus. Once the eggs hatch, the larvae tunnel through the fruit, rendering it completely inedible and carrying the infestation to the next host. Because lychee trees grow well in the warm, humid climate of South Texas, they represent a potential breeding ground. The Texas Department of Agriculture maintains strict quarantine boundaries, especially near the border, where the fly is a recurring problem. Moving lychee fruit, or even plants, from an infested area into a clean zone is a severe violation, an attempt to smuggle a potential agricultural disaster across the line. These regulations apply to non-commercial growers who might simply want to share a few pounds of backyard bounty. The risk of one unchecked piece of lychee carrying a few dozen eggs is too great to ignore. This complex regulatory web, designed to protect the industry from foreign pests, also wraps tightly around another distinct, star-shaped fruit, which faces the exact same danger. The star fruit under strict watch, carambola. No fruit looks quite as dramatic when sliced as the carambola, or star fruit, a crisp, tangy trophy of tropical gardening. Yet, this striking fruit sits under the same agricultural surveillance that targets mangoes and lychee. The reason? The Caribbean fruit fly, a pest that devastates soft produce by injecting its eggs into the ripening fruit. For growers in the lower Rio Grande Valley, this means that moving uncertified fruit or plant material out of a designated quarantine zone is a serious violation. The regulation creates a strange paradox. Commercially sold carambola is legal, but the same fruit, harvested by a home gardener and shared with a relative 20 miles away, becomes a smuggled item and a potential agricultural hazard. It's a harsh rule that protects an entire region from a tiny insect. The phantom fruit of the stone, apricots, peaches, plums. Imagine pulling over at a roadside inspection point with a basket of ripe homegrown peaches from across the state line. That basket of stone fruits, including apricots, nectarines, and plums, could earn you a citation. These unassuming fruits are regulated not for the fruit itself, but for the pests hitching a ride on the leaves, stems, or clinging soil. The prime suspect is the oriental fruit moth, a pest whose larvae bore into the fruit and branches, causing damage that spreads quickly. To stop it, Texas implemented specific quarantines against transporting stone fruit plant material from designated high-risk states without certification. The law treats that uninspected homegrown basket of peaches, which often carries the pest's eggs, as a biohazard that directly threatens the massive Texas agriculture industry. The quiet threat from Europe, sweet cherry. The fleeting season of sweet cherries promises the perfect backyard treat, but this dessert fruit is subject to complex regulations designed to block a quiet, persistent pest, the European cherry fruit fly. This small, black and yellow fly is considered one of the most serious cherry pests worldwide. It lays its eggs in the ripening fruit, and the larvae tunnel through the flesh, turning the crop into a mass of maggots and waste. The Texas Department of Agriculture works tirelessly to prevent the introduction of this fly, whose damage could wipe out the entire harvest. Consequently, bringing cherry plants or uncertified fruit from known infested states is strictly prohibited. It's a necessary preemptive strike, an agricultural defense protecting the entire state's crops from a single tiny invader. And so, ends our journey through the shadowy world of restricted fruits, where the simple dream of backyard bounty is constantly at war with invisible enemies, complex laws, and the powerful forces of nature. We've seen how a tiny insect can trigger a $60,000 fine, how a sweet tropical fruit can deliver a severe hazard, and how a beautiful hedge can become an ecological criminal. These forgotten, regulated, or restricted plants are a dramatic reminder that gardening in the modern world is not just a hobby, it's a critical act of biological stewardship. The greatest forbidden fruit of all is the knowledge you now possess, a knowledge that protects your garden, your neighbors, and the future of Texas agriculture. That was an in-depth look at the shadowy world of restricted fruits. Comment down below what you think of these fruits, and if you were surprised by the $60,000 fine or learned something new about protecting your backyard from invaders, hit the like button. And for more deep dives into the unexpected laws and forgotten histories that shape your world, be sure to share and subscribe so you don't miss our next video.